Yo, what's up, man? We'll let a couple more people flow in here. I do want to start this kind of talking about what our vision for this space is for the long term. And we want this to really be a series, not a one-time thing. And this is the first episode of that, so we're excited for it. On Twitter, it's really easy to talk about trading and everything like that all day, every day. Long-term investing, sometimes, it's a lot of strategy and then kind of sit and wait and let stuff play out. It's not in the every single day. But we just saw that there was too many spaces on technical analysis and everything short term, and just not enough on this whole long-term thesis. We're excited to kind of put this together and really trying to make it an ongoing thing. We're trying to work on how can we do it every single week or every single other week and not make it boring or stale. What we really want to do on this space and what we came up with is we want to do deep dives into stocks and whatever. Each of the people up here, each of our amazing speakers are fantastic long-term investors that came with one stock prepared. And the goal while they're doing these theses is to kind of explain what they're looking at, what they're looking for, trying to give out lessons. How do I get started? How do I look at this balance sheet? What am I looking for? And really trying to go through the story of a company kind of as a lesson and get lessons in there. So, we're always looking to improve the spaces. This is the first of many. So we're excited to do this. Let me know what everyone in the crowd thinks. We're coming in with a bang this week. We got a bunch of top class long-term investors up here. Stock Talk Weekly, From Growth to Value, and Brad up here to give you guys amazing knowledge. I see Connor in the crowd. I would love to have him on a future episode of this. I know he's a great long-term investor as well. But with that, I will throw it back to Gav so we can kind of get moving into it a little bit. Or if there's anything else you wanted to say.
Yeah, no, definitely. I wouldn't say that we have too many of these trading spaces. I think, I just think we want to achieve a balance. So we're going to be throwing more of these, long-term ones in too. Just don't want to lean too far either way because we do know that there's a balance within investors here. In addition, if anyone's unfamiliar, my name is Gav Blacksburg. I do run the Wolf account, which you see up here co-hosting, as well as my personal account, which maybe I'll get that into here. Big shout out to Joey from the Wolf team, who's currently in here on the Wolf account, so that we can have that in here. Make sure you're checking out what they are doing. And with that, I think we can go ahead and get started with this. So Brad, would you like to lead us off with the stock that you're going to be analyzing today? And, we do only have, like Stock Market News pointed out, 3 speakers for here. So feel free to take your time. I know that you always have plenty to say, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to get to really dive into a specific company. That's one of the most enjoyable things for me. Hence the term Stock Market Nerd. But for me, it is Progeny today. So it's a fertility benefits manager. It kind of sits as a bolt-on to insurance companies that serve employers and help them provide fertility benefits in a more efficient, successful, and economical way. So what I'm going to do is kind of cover the inherent issues with fertility treatment, go into how Progeny fixes those issues, go into the actual results that we have from the CDC on quantifying its impact, and then go into maybe some optionality in financial stuff. But starting with fertility's issues. So despite the ailment impacting 1 out of 8 couples in the United States today, that's something that surprised me a little bit. The American Medical Association did not recognize it as a disease until 4 years ago. So as a result, just 19 states have mandated insurance laws in place requiring some form of coverage. Just 5 states have any kind of legislation or guidance on IVF or in vitro fertilization, which is a very expensive and very common treatment within this field. So health insurers are not much better. A lot of health insurance carriers have products that use what's called a limited lifetime dollar maximum. So this essentially or effectively places a ceiling on how much fertility treatment coverage an insured life has. So these limited lifetime dollar maximums are generally around $15,000, according to the Journal of American Medical Association. The average cost for a round of treatment is $60,000, so 4 times the average cost of these limited lifetime dollar maximums. So what this does is it really pushes specialists and prospective parents to make aggressive and somewhat unsafe decisions. So things like transferring multiple embryos in an IVF treatment, which leads to higher multi-birth rates, and which leads to skyrocketing neonatal intensive care unit. So that's NICU costs, which the employer and the insurer end up bearing on their own. So just kind of for context on how this multiple birth, on how these incentives create multiple births, or a multiple birth scenario, and why that's that's an issue, aside from the most important factor, which is multiple births are not as safe for mothers. But the mean cost of a single birth over the last 5 years was 36 grand. That's compared to $153,000 for twins and over $500,000 for triplets. So, and then also preterm births alone, which is that's another very common side effect of these limited lifetime dollar maximums, pushing less than perfect decisions. So it leads to a lot of preterm births, which alone in the United States costs us $40 billion per year. So again, private employers and carriers are often bearing the bulk of these costs. And then just going back to that $15,000 limit on the lifetime dollar maximums, when you're spending $15,000 and it's not equating to anything, not only is that leading to all these NICU costs, which are being borne by the employer, but it's also a waste of $15,000. So the treatment, when you don't allow mothers to go through their own customized, genetically determined round of treatment, when you don't allow them to go through a full course, it's essentially a waste of money, and it's obviously a waste of time and a safety hazard for mothers as well. So there's also issues with fertility medication, which Progeny has an RX product which caters to that and cuts down costs and some of the administrative red tape that goes along with assigning these medications, which is extremely important because you can imagine the time sensitivity of these processes. The biological clocks always tick. So when fertility medications take 4 weeks to arrive at your doorstep, that can make all the difference in the world between having a safe and happy and successful pregnancy or not. So the solutions and what Progeny, how Progeny kind of turned this on its head and tried to improve it. So Progeny built what's called a smart cycle, which is essentially 19 different smart cycle bundles that can be mixed and matched to ensure the most customizable plans in the industry today. Clients usually purchase 2 to 3 cycles per employee. So if you think about it, Progeny obsesses over aggregating all of the latest and greatest technology, over aggregating all of the most in the know professionals and getting them on their advisory boards to consistently consult with them on which treatments need to be added, which need to be subtracted, and how new bundles need to be formed. So that ensures that more successful births, shorter time to pregnancy, which inherently lends itself to lower costs for the employer and creates a really compelling win-win. But not only that, so fertility specialists also, we have to remember, are graded really on outcome data, on how they're performing. And these limited lifetime dollar maximums that I cited early on in the conversation, they preclude fertility specialists from choosing the best treatment plans with their members in order to pursue the best and safest pregnancy. So they're really being handcuffed as well, and they're being precluded from being as successful as they can possibly be. And just kind of putting numbers behind what the cost savings look like for employers. And I'll go into more quantified advantages from CDC moving forward. But to begin to talk about it, so Progeny's pregnancy rate per IVF transfer is 61%. That's versus 53% on the national average. So this translates into about 1.63 IVF treatments per Progeny member versus 1.88 for the USA as a whole. Considering that these IVF treatments cost $12,000 per round, I'm not misspeaking, $12,000 per round. This leads to savings of about $3,000 per employee. And when Progeny is serving behemoths like Microsoft and Amazon with tens and tens and tens of thousands of employees, this savings really adds up very quickly. But that is a great transition into quantifying the impact that Progeny has, because we can talk about how they create more optionality and they eliminate these lifetime dollar maximums, and that makes them better. But there's a lot of data actually pointing to the fact that they are better. So over the last 6 years, we've had reports published by the Society for Assisted Reproductive Technology, that's SART, and in conjunction with the Center for Disease Control, so CDC, that just tangibly and concretely points to how much better Progeny is versus the field. So they offer a 16% higher pregnancy rate and a 26% lower miscarriage rate versus assisted fertility treatment cycles as a whole in the United States. IVF multiples rate is 72% lower than the national mean, with single embryo transfers being 41% higher than the national mean. This isn't just a flash in the pan. Progeny has raised its live birth rate over the national mean from 23% to 25% year over year. And it's been 6 consecutive years of these leads growing for every single study. Maybe unsurprisingly, this translates into a really, really high net promoter score of plus 79 for physicians, and then, or I'm sorry, for the fertility product, and then for RX, their prescription product, it's plus 81. So really creating a lot of value. And then I'm going to talk about kind of the differentiator and how it's sticky beyond just offering better treatments and giving access to better care. So Progeny enjoys a pre-tax edge versus some of these other next generation fertility disruptors. So I'm thinking of Carrot Fertility and Maven Clinic. If any of you guys have heard of any of those, but they're pretty small companies. So the only reason I know about that is because I did so much work on Progeny. But they offer their treatments, and they offer their treatments on a post-tax basis. So instead of pre-tax, they offer it post-tax, which means when Carrot and Maven are servicing a client, these clients must pay income tax on the amount of the reimbursement for the treatment, which adds a new layer of inefficiency and substantial out-of-pocket costs. So again, $60,000 is the average course of a round of treatment. If you want to plug a 24% income tax rate on that, which is pretty standard. So this advantage saves Progeny members $14,000 per course of treatment on average. So just absolutely incredible value creation that they're creating. And I talked to James Hart, who's a VP at the company, and one of my main question was, how does this advantage exist, and why isn't everyone else, why aren't all the other disruptors doing this? And according to Hart, Progeny really benefited early on from the influence of a small cohort of large and powerful clients. So he didn't say Microsoft, but what we can assume it's Microsoft, and because that was their earliest behemoth client. Amazon came on a few years later, but these clients, in his own words, went to bat for Progeny and pushed national carriers to allow Progeny's integration to create this pre-tax benefits program. So really, it was a matter of it's almost a chicken and the egg argument. So Progeny had to get these really influential clients onboarded first in order for these very influential clients to push all these national carriers to integrate and allow for the pre-tax advantage. And because they were able to do that with all the extreme value creation that they're able to generate, and I cited all those statistics earlier on, they were able to onboard a Microsoft, and they were able to onboard an Amazon and an Uber and a PayPal to get these mammoth clients, again, and I quote, going to bat for Progeny to get these effective enough integrations so that we go from post-tax reimbursement and paying 14 grand in income taxes to no income tax whatsoever. So Progeny's reach in market, as you can imagine, is pretty strong at this point in time. And I should mention, it's a $4 billion company. So it is a market share leader in any way you slice it. And it's still just a $4 billion company competing in a market that it believes is going to be $40 billion in size over the next several years. But I cited some of the other clients that it services right now. So I won't get into that, but I do want to get into some macroeconomic tailwinds that are pushing Progeny success and continuing to push the need for Progeny services. So assisted reproductive treatment cycles account for just 2% of births in the United States. When we look at other developed nations, I could talk about maybe a Denmark, or look at some others, Germany or France or the UK, it's closer to 10%. So we are severely lagging, and that is a byproduct of the extremely high costs that patients have to endure for going through these processes, and products like Progeny only being a few years old, which are directly enhancing access. So that 2% should slowly climb to 10% based on us being the same, being human beings, just like people in Denmark and France and the UK are human beings, and we have similar biological needs. So as Progeny continues to become more ubiquitous, and as it continues to boost coverage and boost access and boost efficacy, we should see that start to climb to 10%. Now, we also have to keep in mind that where was I about to go with that? That things like the LGBTQ plus community and single births by choice, those two cohorts of mothers or of people are becoming much larger. And as you can imagine, every single one of those births require a service that Progeny provides. The other thing is the bear case for Progeny is that the natural rate of birth is falling in the United States. But when you dissect that decline of the natural rate of birth, it actually becomes somewhat of a bull case for Progeny. So overall, natural birth rate over the last 10 years in the United States has fallen by 1.1%. But that birth rate for women over the age of 35 has actually risen by 2.2%. And things like teen births falling, which is a wonderful thing, are really contributing to that decline in natural birth rate. And as women get older, not to sound insensitive or anything, but the biological clock does tick, and the needs for these services become inherently higher, which feeds Progeny's growth. In terms of what's next, they really are in the early stages of penetrating this market. So they're in less than 5% of their serviceable addressable market in terms of clients, and less than 3% in terms of covered lives. So a lot of companies, the what's next is, okay, what product are you going to create for me next, or what geography are you going to expand into next? They don't really need to do that, just because there's so much low hanging fruit left for them to take advantage of, which is a really good transition into the financial performance and how that's translating into really strong results. So most recent quarter, revenue grew about 99% year over year. That did benefit from backlog or elected care backlog unwinding, which benefited fertility treatment as a whole and Progeny as a whole. But from 2018 to 2020, their revenue CAGR is 80%. And that coincides with a net income margin of 14% and an adjusted EBITDA margin of 14%. So there's really no cost incurred between EBITDA and net income on the income statement. But one of the most encouraging things that I take away from the margin conversation is that this company, and I would encourage every other company to do the same thing, discloses a EBITDA margin on incremental revenue. So that really gives us a sense of where the business is going in terms of unit economics. So I said their adjusted EBITDA margin sits at 14%. Their adjusted EBITDA margin on incremental revenue sits at 28%, so a full 1,400 basis points ahead of that, which is why over the last several years we've seen such consistent margin expansion, and to coincide with that really favorable top line growth. And then I'll go into one more thing, and then I'll pass it on because I've been talking for a really long time now. But their guidance has actually been reduced twice this year. So they missed their forward guidance twice in the last 2 quarters, and there was a reason that they cited, which when you look across other players in elective care, namely like a GoodRx for me, which I focus on a lot, they're seeing the exact same things. So it was due to a temporary dip in utilization rate. It trod at about 88% and has since risen back to 90%. And their guidance infers that there's no further improvement to that. So I thought that would be just because of variant outbreaks and people becoming more hesitant. Progeny actually cited and talked to everyone in the industry to make sure that this really odd explanation was actually warranted, that it really coincided with summer travel demand and pent up travel demand unwinding, as people were able to go on vacation for the first time in 2 years. And that sounds a little wonky to me, but when you look across utilization rates by geography, and the COVID outbreaks have certainly not been uniform in their intensity by geography, those utilization dips are uniform, which points to that actually being the case, and actually being encouraging in that it's extremely temporary and has already begun to recover. So I want to talk about one more thing, which is valuation. So enterprise to sales is not a really useful metric here at all, just because gross profit sits at around 30%. So yeah, you could say, okay, it trades at an EV to sales multiple of 7 times, but it could trade at the exact same gross profit multiple as a company with a 60% gross multiple trading at half the sales multiple, or double the sales multiple. I'm sorry. So in terms of multiples for Progeny, their EV to EBITDA multiple for 2022 is sitting at around 40 times. Their price to earnings ratio is sitting at about 85 times, depending on where it actually shakes out. And they're expected to do 50% top line growth again this year with precipitously expanding margins. So looking across the landscape, you can't really find 40 times EBITDA for the type of top line growth and the type of margin expansion and the type of market leadership and value creation that Progeny is providing. So just for all of those reasons, it is one of my largest positions, and I plan to continue adding to it into any future multiple compression or intense volatility, just for all of those reasons I just mentioned of the deep dive that I to Progeny's business. So if you'd like to read the entire on my Substack, which is entirely free, And that covers a lot of what I've just covered in a lot more detail, so that I don't talk for an hour and a half, because we've got two other amazing speakers that I'm really excited to hear from. But thanks so much for having me, and I will pass the mic.
Quickly, though, I do want to kind of do this as we're going to go through and listen these amazing fundamental theses. The first one we just got from Brad on Progeny. I'm going to just say it wrong. I shouldn't even say it again.
Close enough.
PGNY, right, Brad?
No, PROG, right?
Is it PROG?
So it is so the ticker's PGNY. I probably should have left.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah,
no.
Small caps for, bro.
So funny story. When I was interviewing this VP, I called it Progeny, and he's like, nope, it's Progeny. So that's how our conversation started. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, it's Progeny.
Perfect. Progeny. Okay, I'm on the right ticker now. Pick ticker PGNY. And really the point of this space isn't necessarily here's this stock, whatever, here's the thesis on it. It's really to hear when Brad gets excited about a stock, all the things that he looks at and some of the stuff that maybe you should be looking at, and like, okay, here's what fundamental analysis actually means through the example of a stock. I think the best person is going to be writing down some terms or some whatever in there, kind of looking it up and applying it to other stuff. With the idea of turning the spaces into a real long-term investor series, I feel like the best place is to start right at the start. Brad, I'm going to start this first question with you, and I'll kind of do this to each of our speakers after they throw out their thesis. But like, this is not the type of company that a 23-year-old, 24-year-old is just going to know off the top of their mind. So how did you find these opportunities or these stocks where you can then start looking into them?
Yeah, believe it or not, at 24, I am not a fertility expert, and I have very little experience direct experience in the fertility category. Thankfully, maybe I'll have kids one day, but really not looking for that. I'm too poor to have kids right now. So if we're being candid, but really,
they're not kids.
Right. But really, so. I use Twitter and I use friends from Motley Fool, who I got to know very well while I was working there, as lead generation. So I don't take investment picks and just run with them, but I do use people's investment picks and smart individuals who I lean on for opinions, for inspiration. And this was recommended by Joey Salitro, who's a smart guy from Motley Fool, who used to be a big Twitter contributor. And then Brian Feroldi as well. So when those two people say nice things about a company, that generally prompts me to want to look into it a lot more. And occasionally when I do look into it a lot more, I get very excited enough to start a position, which is exactly what happened here. But yeah, the biggest part of my research was becoming a little bit more well-versed in fertility treatments and how that process actually works. So that was definitely interesting. Just sitting at a coffee shop and reading about fertility. I'm sure people thought that was really weird as they were walking by my computer screen, but it's just part of the process. So yeah, did not have a deep base of fertility knowledge before this, and I'm definitely not an expert now, but I think I have the base of knowledge that I need to confidently own it.
Brad, you gonna ever use this as like part of your pickup lines? You're just like the fertility expert.
For sure, yeah. That'll work every time.
I love it. Evan, what else did you have? I know you had a couple questions in there.
No, I think we'll keep it moving. We'll throw one question to each person, and then we'll kind of come back and maybe get some good wrap up in there. While we have the chance to interject, I do want to give a big shout out to all the speakers that we have up here. Make sure you are following them. Check them out. Brad, From Growth to Value, who actually might have just gone down as a listener, or could be a glitch. Spaces loves to glitch. And Stock Talk Weekly are going to give us amazing theses. Gurgs came up here and joined in, is going to give us some stuff as well after. And big shout out to Bullish Rippers for hosting this thing, the spaces. Doing a bunch of these, and excited to have Gav on that account hosting. But back to you, and you can keep us moving.
Yeah, I was definitely about to throw it over to From Growth to Value, who is coming back up right now. I'm gonna guess. What's up, Kris? You good?
Yeah, I'm back. I was thrown out for a while.
Are you on Android or iPhone?
I'm on Android.
Oh yeah, that's gonna happen a few times. So let's throw it over to you now. The floor is all yours. If you do get booted, just I guess close the app or something, request, and we'll get you back up here.
All right.
But all you.
All right. So I'm going to talk about Fiverr, and Fiverr is actually A marketplace. I'm hesitating a little bit. I will explain later why. It's a marketplace where you can get access to freelancers who can help you with your project. And that can be anything. I mean, you can. The traditional case is often I need a logo, or maybe maybe some of you use that to edit podcasts, or those are the more traditional, or intros or what have you. Those are the more traditional use cases, but Fiverr has actually expanded a lot, and there are, I don't remember exactly, but more than 500 categories now, going from all kind of administrative tasks to creative and developers, whatever you want. There's often there's often a possibility on Fiverr. I was in a Twitter Spaces several months ago, and we talked about Fiverr as well. And the one of the listeners asked to be a speaker, and he had been using Fiverr for all kinds of quirky things, like he asked for a personalized erotic story about a threesome between Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, and Cathy Wood. So you can have quite a lot of different services on Fiverr. And it's
Bro, I just bought both. I heard that and just bought both on Fiverr.
Sorry, could you repeat?
He said he bought both on Fiverr. After hearing that, I'm short Fiverr.
Great. Yeah, I mean, you can really, I mean, if you want to have an app, that's possible. If you want to have, someone making, I know someone who he's a manager, quite high level, and he has to do 2 to 3 presentations a week. Well, he outsources everything to Fiverr. So you can do a lot of, you can outsource a lot of tasks. And I was a user, or I tried using Fiverr in 2015 or so, and I thought it was crap. I mean, I didn't find the quality that I need. I needed a logo for a local running competition that I helped organizing, and the logos were really crap, and eventually we just went to someone local here. We paid much more, but it was quality. And so when Fiverr had its IPO, I was not really attracted to it because of that user experience. So it had its IPO, I think, somewhere in 2019, at the end of 2019, I think. And I was not interested because I had been a user. But then in 2020, I read Clayton Christensen's book about disruptive innovation. So he coined the term, and Christensen is he was a professor, and he had a lot of high profile fans like Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos in typical Jeff Bezos style. Someone entering the executive suite had to read 3 books, and Clayton Christensen's was one of them. And if you look at disruptive innovators, what you see is that often they're very, low class starting off. What I mean is, people think it's a rubbish service. It's good as a toy, for example, or to have something of low quality. Maybe if you want a logo for I don't know, a night out with the boys, and you have a t-shirt, that's something you can do on Fiverr. And that was actually when I read the book, I thought, oh my God, I have to go back to Fiverr. Why? Because those typical innovators, they appeal to a certain public, which the cost is the most important element there, and it's only later that company goes, to higher echelons of the market, and I think still a lot of people see Fiverr, and the name Fiverr comes from it's originally it was $5 for a gig, and still a lot of people see Fiverr as that original company it was, and still is to a certain extent. You can still get very low quality, very low priced logos, for example, for that night out or what have you. You can pay still if you.
Did he get booted? Yeah.
Is this the boot incoming? Rip.
It's the Android boot. Okay. Let's see how far my Twitter puts are up. Just check real quick.
No, we'll keep it moving a little bit. We'll get back to him. I'm gonna actually kind of use one of the opportunities to throw a question out there, and then maybe when he gets back, he can get into the last part of his Fiverr thesis. We'll definitely give him the opportunity to finish up. So I kind of got a good, simple question here, I know for most people, but you got to learn it once. And for those long-term investors in here who are really new at this, you may not know it, but Stock Talk Weekly, you here?
I am here.
Yeah, I would love to throw the question to you of this is the first space where really kind of new long-term investors here. Where do you find the information that you're really kind of looking into? Yeah.
Find which information?
Just like about companies, whether it's their reports, their filings, etc., or maybe some other websites that kind of aggregate data in a good way. But really, where are you finding the information about the companies when you do your due diligence?
It's a bit of a broad question. For filings, I just go to sec.gov, but with regard to company-related information, you can go to a company's investor relation page if you're looking for, PRs or internally released information. You could just go to Google too. There's a variety of places that you can look at information. Fintel, Finviz. There's a million and one place. There's no specific source I go to necessarily. There are some, places that aggregate information about companies, but it usually tends to be either inaccurate or delayed or not updated. I would love it if there was, kind of a central hub to go to that had like a summary of every ER and a summary of all the filings, and that'd be a really useful hub of information. I just don't know of a source like that has pretty much everything related to a company in one place. There's usually a number of places you can go.
But there's one though, right? I think Bloomberg has everything. Whatever you mentioned.
Yeah,
Bloomberg does, but the organization is, I guess on a terminal it might be different, but
yep.
Bloomberg, if you're going for news and for other information, yeah, Bloomberg's good, but they still don't have everything in one place. I would say you'd still have to go to a few different.
For me,
terminals also though, Gurg, though it's kind of not for the everyday person in there. So it is definitely the best place for it, but I would say 99.9999% of this chat in here does not have access to terminal and won't be able to. So I think I agree with Stock Talk that there's not that one place for it. I have found success, Finviz. All the information in there is not 100% accurate, but the screener is great to find decent stuff. Company filings, if you Google this company and then investor relations after, you will find a bunch of filings there. I enjoy Seeking Alpha. It's solid that with decent information there. They do have a paywall. There's other similar websites that can do that. But yeah, typically there's going to be 2 or 3 websites in there.
We've got Kris back.
I'll just quickly chime in with I spend 80% of my time on IR pages. So for me, it's getting all the information from the primary sources and then kind of piecing it together and vetting it with third-party sources, which I think was what Stock Talk Weekly was getting at.
Yeah, just going to investors. Just go to a company's website and just go to investors relations. You'll find most of the stuff that you need there, and then you can verify it independently.
And for the filings, the best option is SEC Edgar. It's a free website, but the SEC, they have all the filings. And the good thing about that is you can go, select the stock you want, put your email there, and as soon as something is filed, you'll get an email right away within 5 seconds. So that's a good way to get access to complete filings and be the first one to get them. So SEC Edgar.
I'm going to talk a
Very
little
nice.
bit more about this concept in the future, but literally any of these services you hear about, SEC Edgar, the website is not great. It's going to be maybe a little bit difficult to use. Everything is one YouTube video search away. How do I use this? How do I do whatever? And a little bit of learning.
Yes,
And use that
the
concept going forward.
website might be ugly, but they do have all the filings, and that's the official source, right? Most of the people will be delayed, and these guys will have it first. Because when you do a
Perfect.
filing, right, you submit it to the SEC, and that's the website. Like this is where it goes live the first time. So
Perfect. Thank you, Gurg. So we're dealing with the Android curse. So we're going to quickly throw it back over to Growth to Value. Make sure he can get in here so we can hear his full thesis on Fiverr. Yeah, we'd love to kind of hear the second part to that.
Yeah, sorry for that.
No, it's not you. Trust me, we've
Just
been dealing with that problem. But all you.
so just to add to that, you can also go to the investor relations pages and subscribe there, so you get all the news as well. So just to add that. So I was talking about Fiverr as the crappy company or the crappy service maybe. It used to be low quality. But what has happened? So it's as I said, it's a typical innovator, disruptive innovator, and that means that they start from being low quality and they continue to put out features, and then based on those features, they improve. Or based on the feedback that they get from those features, and that's different from other companies, incumbents who want to have a perfect product before they put it out. Disruptive innovators, just throw it out there, often for free, or and then I have to think of Cloudflare, for example. Cloudflare puts out a lot of new products. I think it was more than 700 last year. New products and features. By the way, Matthew Prince, the founder and CEO of Cloudflare, he was a student of Clayton Christensen, and he was Clayton Christensen wrote him a note that he followed him closely, and if he ever wanted advice, he could get it. So unfortunately, Clayton Christensen, died of cancer. I think about 10 years ago now. What we see now with Fiverr is, it has done a few things. So one, it has made those services into products, and that's very important. If you look at Upwork, it's still, really tailored to people. In Fiverr, it's much more standardized, and you can buy a product. For example, you want that logo, you go to Fiverr, you type logo, and then you have lots of people, lots of styles as well. And you look at, for example, you can click on modern, or you can click on vintage, and then you get lots of portfolios of creators. And
the Android
this is
strikes
so
again.
I mean, he's dropping knowledge bombs and he keeps getting interrupted. This is a bummer.
I in all full disclosure, I hold one share of Twitter out of solidarity for spending a quarter of my life on the platform. But outside of that, no button. All right, it looks like he's back. What's up, Kris?
I'm just going to pretend nothing happened, so I'm just going to continue. So you can go to, you can go to Fiverr. You can type logo. You can go to vintage, for example. You look through portfolios. You see a logo or several logos or a style that you like. You contact that seller, and you talk about. You can talk. You can ask questions, etc. And then you can agree on a certain gig. And, usually it's standardized. So you have basic standard and premium, if I remember well. And so, by the way, my logo that you see now has been made on Fiverr. Then you pay, and the good thing is that Fiverr keeps the money. So only when you accept the work that has been done. So you can ask for revisions and etc. And the premium, they can be, for example, done within 24 hours, unlimited revisions, etc., etc., etc. And then Fiverr keeps the money until you say, I accept this work, and then the creator gets paid. So that's a bit of the system, and Fiverr, takes its cuts, and that is quite high. So the take rate of Fiverr is more than 28%. If you compare that to Upwork, for example, that's only 13 and a half or so more than double. And the reason is that people really, like the fact that it's cheap anyway, so they don't mind paying Fiverr a bit. And also because it adds a lot of trust to the platform. So what happens now, and I said when I started out that I was a bit hesitant to call it a marketplace, because more and more you see that it's transforming into a platform. And by that is that it has all kinds of services, yes, but also it has added, Fiverr has added, even in the last year, it has added quite a lot of features which make that it will be more and more interesting for companies, and not just individual buyers, for bigger companies. So for example, you can take a subscription. For example, you need an SEO expert. It's not that you want SEO, being done once. No, you want that, for example, every month, or every week, maybe even, depending on kind of products that you have, etc., etc. So you can take a subscription to that seller, and that's great for you because you can rely on it then, and it's great for the seller because it's recurring revenue for the seller, and of course it's recurring revenue for Fiverr as well. So that's one of the things that they have implemented. Another one is Fiverr Plus, which is a subscription actually for the sellers. So they get a success manager, so someone who helps them to get successful on Fiverr, how they should present their gigs, their portfolios, etc. They get more statistics. They can give coupons, etc. So they get some perks for that subscription. But the most important one, I think, is Fiverr Business, or one of the most important ones, because there they go to bigger businesses, and they have created a whole virtual room. So if you're a bigger company and for example, you want to make an app, you need a developer, but you also need someone who's great at user interfaces and graphics and what have you. So all those people can work together in a virtual place, virtual room, and you can really set the rules there. For example, this stage of our project has to be finished, in 1 month, for example. Or usually it's with 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 phases, but that's dependent on the customer. And what you see is that this is a great place for businesses to get bigger projects done as well, and that is very important. If you look at the revenue of Fiverr, this feature was only introduced about a year ago, and I think, I'm not really sure, but it was already about 10% of revenue. So this is growing very fast. So everything that Fiverr does is really going market. You see that they regularly buy agencies. For example, they bought a creative agency called Working Not Working, which had worked for Netflix, for Google, for Apple. So that's really upscale. For example, one of the things I would never have thought when I went back to the platform is the guy who created the Apple logo is a seller on Fiverr. Starting from 10,000.
Starting from 10,000. Well said. Yep.
There we go.
We'll get back up here.
I think we're going for a decent bit towards the end there. I would definitely love to give him the opportunity to finish up his thoughts on Fiverr. While we're doing that, I'll throw out another question to Gurg and Stock Talk and Brad. I don't see him back up yet. There we go. Great. Yeah, we'll definitely give you the chance to kind of keep going and finish up your Fiverr.
All right.
Love to hear.
Sorry, I have to say
no worries.
It's really the first time I get booted out so much. I've had it once or twice before in Spaces, but for example, that was the last thing I said. I don't know if you heard it, but one of the guy who created the Apple logo, for example, is one of the sellers on Fiverr, and starting from 10,000 K and going upward for his gig, and that also shows that it's going up market. But they make acquisitions, and one of the things they're really good at is tying in both the seller and the buyer to the platform. And I'm calling it a platform now, not a marketplace. For example, one of the things that they have done is you can now, as a seller, you can now have your health insurance on Fiverr. Fiverr helps you there and has a program for sellers, which is great, I think. So that's just one example, and there are more examples like that. They really help the sellers. And one of the other things is that they are constantly focusing on removing friction. And I have to say, I became an avid user now of Fiverr, and I really like the fact that they remove the friction so much. It's a bit like the Amazon one-click kind of thing. Removing friction can be a huge differentiator, although you may not immediately see that because it's so easy that you don't think about the process. Now, talking about Amazon, I think this is really the way to see it. I mean, I'm not saying that Fiverr will become Amazon-like, but what I mean is that it's still very early in digital freelance work. So less than 5% of freelance work is done digitally. And this is a bit like e-commerce. So, of course, you're always going to have, physical contact with freelancers, but the market will continue to grow there. And I think this is e-commerce in, let's say, 2005 or so. So if you look at what's going on right now, and I read a book, The End of Jobs, and it's a very interesting book. It's about 10 years old, maybe a bit older already. And it predicted what we see now in this period happening. So, a lot of people don't go back to work because, they started something and they became entrepreneurs. And what you also see is that even the people that, that went back to work, they often have a side gig. And, that evolution is only starting right now. If you look at people who do that the most, it's Gen Z. So, the young people. That's one of the elements that, makes me very bullish on Fiverr as well, that this market is so huge. It's still starting out. So even if, if the company itself would not, it would be almost impossible not to grow. Let's put it that way, just because of the secular trend, this very strong secular trend that is there. So at this moment, because the stock has crashed so much after COVID, because it's now seen as a COVID play, right? And because this has become such a generally accepted term that I think it's time to, to start looking at companies which are, slashed completely. I think I'm not sure. I think Fiverr is down more than it's more than 70% from its highs. I think it's still very early in this market, and Fiverr will continue to grow for a very, very long time, consistently, and more of this will go online, just like has happened with e-commerce. E-commerce is now about 20% of all transactions are there, and I think this market, digital freelancers, will go the same route. It will take probably 10, 15, maybe 20 years, just like it did for e-commerce. But, look at e-commerce, it's still growing fast. And I think the same thing will happen to Fiverr. And what I said was that the stock had been slashed about 70%, which means that it now has a market cap, which is even smaller than Progeny. Or Progeny, I already forgot again, Brad, sorry. It's just a 3.4 billion, I think, market cap right now. So I can see this company go, of course, over the long term, but I can see it go 20x or even more, because it's,
Hey, just wanted to cut in quickly. We are, just with time and everything, we love these deep dive explanations. We want you to go as deep as possible. We love it. We'd love to have you on in the future, but for time, we would love to just want to kind of wrap up.
I was rounding it off. So that was the last thing that I was going to say, actually, that I could see becoming. I could see this become a 20 bagger over time or so, or even more, if you have the patience and if you have the stomach to ride out the high volatility.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Great thesis. Love it. Love to have you on again to get into some more names that you got on there. I'll give it to Gav to keep us moving now.
Yeah, we can keep it going. I've also been looking at these stocks. Fiverr, really interesting one with that run up. It looks like, if you go to those March lows, where the stock really hadn't moved a lot, to be honest, in the March lows, it hadn't moved a lot for a while. The stock ran 1,362% in 11 months and 2 days when it peaked out in February, and pretty much from the March lows. I'm just trying to throw some stuff on here. I mean, it's obviously come down a pretty significant amount now from those all-time highs. It is down 73%. So, you've just heard the fundamental case for it. So if, this is a stock that you believe in, when your thesis remains, when you like the business models, when something's down 73%, definitely go ahead and give it a look if it is a stock that you are, either familiar with or you want to get more used to. Okay, we're going to keep it rolling, but big shout out to...
Before we get it over to Stock Talk, I just want to first finish off that shout out you were given earlier to Bullish Rippers. This is the first of many spaces we're going to be doing, the second from many spaces, first in this series. Gav is going to be hosting a bunch of spaces. I'm tweeting from the Rippers account all the time. This is, if you're a fan of our spaces, this is a great to be following account to be following, a really great combination of what I think mine and Gav's best parts on Twitter really are. Just wanted to get that in there. Maybe a quick Google Spaces calendar shout out. We haven't gotten any in there before we go over to Stock Talk.
Yeah, I have a question. You guys have so many spaces. How can someone keep track of them? Easily, right? It's too complicated for me.
Gurg is right. We have so many spaces going on. I mean, I see Jonah in the crowd. We have a space with him tomorrow. Did y'all know about that? I have only posted about it once so far. So if you hadn't seen my pinned tweet on the Wolf account, then you wouldn't have known. We also have other spaces happening all the time, ranging from fundamental and technical analysis, crypto, NFTs, and a little bit of everything. How can you find when all of these are? Simply by going and DMing one of either the Wolf account or the Stock Market News account. Shoot us over your Gmail, and we will add you to our free public calendar. That way, you'll see it's a Google Calendar. We put all the details on there. Speakers, details, recordings, everything in one place. It is so simple. There's thousands of people on it. There are CEOs, hedge fund managers. I wish I could see the AUM of everybody that's on that calendar, and just so many more. Even people. Oh, it is today. I thought Jonah. I forget it's Thursday. The week is running. I have a space with Jonah actually in an hour. That is today. Thank you, Jonah. See, if everybody had the Google Calendar, they would know when that space is going to be. Jonah, you are correct. I see the text. Even I get mixed up. Okay. So one more time, if you just want to know when all of our spaces are, not like me get mixed up, shoot over a DM to either the Wolf account or Stock Market News. Jump onto our free Google Calendar where you'll be able to see all the details. Just make life easy for yourself. And if you don't like it, you can always unsubscribe at any time. No need to be committed to it. Won't even tell us, but you'll probably love it. So with that being said, Evan, did you have anything else you wanted to add on to that? And then I think Kris had one other point.
That was perfect. You can DM any of the accounts, Bullish Rippers, Stock Market News, or Wolf, any of the accounts as a host or co-host, and we'll get you right onto that. One of the best tools that we've created already, and we're always looking to add to it. It's only going to be getting better. I have some ideas brewing in the background right now. So yeah, make sure you're on it.
And that's why we got to keep this one moving so we can get everybody involved. But Kris, did you have one last point? I saw your hand up.
Yeah, well, actually, I was trying to wave to Jonah, but I just wanted to add one more thing. If you look at the gross margins of Fiverr, they're very high. They're mid 80s, and if the stock trades at enterprise value gross profit ratio forward then of just 10, so it's quite cheap right now, I think. So. But I didn't really want to add that. I just wanted to wave to Jonah, but I took the wrong thick fingers.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, let's keep it going. So our third planned speaker for today is Stock Talk Weekly. So the floor is yours.
Hey man. So full transparency, I didn't prepare anything for today. So, at risk of sounding unprepared behind Brad and behind from value here. I was thinking of talking about Tesla or IonQ, and as you guys know, I'm usually on the cutting edge side of the companies that I invest in. I mean, it's a riskier way to do it. There's not as much fundamental history for a lot of these companies, or even fundamental basis if you look at it in a vacuum. But I thought about it, and I actually think I'm probably going to go and talk about lithium because. Of all the industries or sectors that I'm bullish on, I think lithium is one of them that I view as kind of an inevitable industry. And I really view most of the constituents, that are into lithium, especially domestically, to benefit from that growth kind of in a winner agnostic way. So two tickers, just to bring up tickers since we're talking about those, that I view, and these are both tickers that I'm personally invested in as well. So the first one is LTHM, which is Livent Corporation. I've owned that stock since it was $8. It's trading at 25 today, even after all the pullbacks we've seen in growth and tech. These lithium names have held up relatively well. And the other one is LAC, which I got long on that a little bit more recently. My cost basis on that is 18. It's trading at 30. So not up as much on that one, but still up nicely on both of them. So I kind of treating those as a pair exposure to lithium growth. So again, that's LTHM and LAC. They're both roughly $3 to $4 billion companies. So, they're mid caps. They're not massive companies, but I'm going to kind of speak to the space in general going forward, and why I really see this as, a space that's going to benefit off a supply bottleneck that I think will last for the next 8 to 10 years at least. When you look at lithium demand from 2020 till now, the jump has never been this big in a year and a half period. The S&P Global Market Intelligence, they project that by 2030, we will have an annual deficit in lithium of 1.7 million metric tons per year. So I'll repeat that again. By 2030, we're projected to have a lithium deficit in terms of the difference between supply and demand of 1.7 million metric tons per year, which, you know, theoretically would catapult the price. Not that it hasn't already catapulted. If you look at the price at the start of 2020 and you look at the price at the start of 2021, so January 2020 through January 2021, we saw about a 300% leap in lithium carbonate prices. If you look at the lithium carbonate prices from January 2021 to January 2022, where we are now, it's been about a 500% leap. So the last 2 years have seen a massive, trampoline in lithium prices. And, we've seen it more on the China side with their expansion, but we're seeing it on the US side as well. And the fact is this is one of those industries where you don't just have this inevitable growth in demand, which is going to come obviously from electric vehicles and also just, the general demand for batteries as well. So, knowing that those trends are, ramping up, we're seeing electric vehicle adoption increase every year. We're seeing battery adoption increase in every year in other use cases as well. And so, knowing that there's, and we don't have a better alternative yet to lithium ion batteries. There's debates about, solid state batteries, which a lot of them are lithium metal based anyway. And then there's debates about, graphene and other replacements. But, at the current juncture, when you think about lithium, a lot of people think, okay, there's a shortage because maybe there isn't enough. But, that's not true. Lithium supply is very plentiful, right? It's one of the most plentiful, like, quote unquote, rare metals on the planet. It's just that it's not being extracted and refined quickly enough. That's the crux of the issue. So there isn't enough extraction infrastructure globally to meet the demand. And the demand's not going to slow down. If you look at the earnings reports from Lithium, from Alivent or Lithium Americas Corporation this year, and you look at the guidance given, both the CEOs said multiple times in the last two earnings calls that they see no scenario in which lithium demand will taper off in the next 5 to 10 years. And it's not really, I feel like this is one of those industries in metals that's far less speculative. I mean, there's almost no scenario where we don't see this ramped up demand. And like I mentioned earlier, especially when you consider that China and the United States are going to spend tens of billions of dollars domesticating rare metal supply chains over the course of the next few years, that's going to add more subsidization to, the bottom lines of these companies. When you look at LTHM specifically, and you look at their last two quarters, right? I mean, the revenues aren't jumping like crazy, but I mean, they're decent. It's decent growth. When you look at their Q2, revenues jumped by 58%. Q3, they jumped by another 48%. And so, you're seeing revenues grow 40 to 50% quarter over quarter. They raised full year guidance twice. They raised it in Q2. They raised it again in Q3. Same thing with LAC. They also raised their full year 2023 guidance already. So, I mean, it's just really stunning how ahead of the ball they are on projecting growth in this industry. And for me, it's, it shows and it leans into showing certainty about the growth that, they're so willing to project demand increases. When you look at Bloomberg's projections are a little bit more even ambitious than the S&P Global Intelligence projections. Bloomberg's projecting a 17-fold increase in demand from 2022 numbers. So not even looking back to last year. This is a more recent report. So they're looking at the updated demand numbers from January 1st, 2022. Excuse me. And they're projecting a 17-fold increase by 2030 in demand alone. Sorry. Excuse me. And when you look back to 2010, if you were to go back and you were to take us out of the COVID picture, take us out of the near-term growth that we've seen as part of electric vehicles, if you go back to 2010, we were at 0.5 gigawatt hours in 2010. And a decade later, we're at 526 gigawatt hours. I mean, that's mind-numbing growth, right? From 0.5 gigawatt hours to 526 gigawatt hours within a decade. And now we're projecting another 17-fold increase within a decade. So this is just a scenario. It's, the case for lithium, if you really want to simplify it out of everything I've said, it's just a supply and demand thing. We have more than enough raw supply of lithium globally, far more than enough. but we have nowhere near the amount of extraction infrastructure. So what that creates is it creates a formula where you have this supply and demand imbalance where the metals are there, the infrastructure just isn't. So it's almost a picture perfect growth scenario for these companies because, as long as they continue to generate revenue and continue to spend that revenue on capacity production, the raw materials are there for them to theoretically endlessly increase capacity. Whereas, because of the current lack of extraction capacity, that's going to drive prices higher due to the supply and demand imbalance. So they have a two-pronged benefit here where, the price of the products that they're producing, the price of lithium is going to continue to increase exponentially, while to meet that demand, they also have basically untapped, unlimited resources globally that they can continue to expand into. And when you look at Livent specifically, LTHM, and that's the one that I've been long for the longest period of time, and you look at their last year reports, one thing they emphasize was that, and I've talked about this before, I trade a lot, I trade and invest in a lot of metal stocks, and I think I've mentioned this before on our spaces, but when you look at these metal stocks, basically any metals, not even just rare metals, get steel or anything. These mining companies in general, you want to go long on these companies when they're at the end of their capex expansion cycles. And so, what that is basically every few years, miners of all sorts will allocate massive portions of their balance sheet to expanding production. And those capex expansion periods usually last between a year to 3 years. I would say most of them last for no longer than about a year and a half. But depending on the industry you're looking at. For lithium capacity cycles, most of them are lasting about a year to year and a half. So for LTHM, they started a capex expansion cycle last year, and they anticipate to be finished it by 2023. So they're going to expand with 5,000 metric tons of hydroxide in Bessemer City, and then they're going to have an additional lithium lithium carbonate expansion of 10,000 metric tons in Argentina, and then another 10,000 tons in 2023. So by early 2023, by the first quarter of 2023 specifically, they expect to have all that expansion complete. And then they'll start a phase 2 at the end of 2023 for an additional 10,000 metric tons in 2024. So these companies are, they see the opportunity. They see that the raw material is available. They're on top of it. And in the near term or in the short term, it's going to weigh on their balance sheets. That's part of these metal stocks, and this is part of the way they work. In the short term, it'll weigh on the balance sheet, but in the long term, it's going to be massively beneficial because they're going to come out, they're going to enter 2023 with about 40% more production capacity. It'll probably take about a year to a year and a half to ramp that expanded production capacity to full scale. Typically once you expand new production facilities, they're not at full scale production instantly. It takes on their last expansion cycle, it took them 6 months. Now they're projecting on this expansion cycle because the expansion is a little bit larger. It'll take them 8 months to achieve full-scale capacity. But, the point is that, these companies are fully aware of, the surplus in raw materials that are available, but they're also aware of the supply and demand imbalance and the fact that they can tap into these raw materials to meet that imbalance. But at the same time, even if they all do, right? Even if LAC, LTHM, all of the, sub $10 billion lithium companies in the country were to tap into capex cycles, they still wouldn't be able to meet the demand. And so knowing that there's going to be this supply deficit that will almost inevitably last for the next decade, it's going to drive, I think these companies are going to be forced to be re-rated by the market is essentially what I'm saying, because it's guaranteed growth, in some cases 50% quarter over quarter, in other cases 300% year over year. I mean, they're all growing, and they're in this perfect storm of this supply and demand imbalance while having the ability to basically get as much business as they can handle, essentially. So these companies are going to be fully booked on business and on their backlogs for the foreseeable future. Any dollar they can earn is theirs, in other words. And so, when you look at lithium prices now, and you may think, okay, 17-fold by 2030, that's ambitious, right? If you go to Bloomberg, that's what they're saying. You go to the S&P Global Intelligence, they're saying 500%. Whatever it may be, between 500% and 17-fold by 2030, it's a crazy jump either way. But when you look at the prices of gold, silver, copper, steel, iron ore, platinum, you look at any of these metals over the last year, I mean, they're either down, if you think of iron ore, down 26% in the past 1 year, or you think about copper, up 24%. I mean, they're in that tight range, right? They're either down or they're up slightly. When you look at lithium in the past year, it's up 697%. So, I mean, it's not even the growth in demand and price for this metal is not even comparable. To me, it's jumping off the table. Like, and I trade these types of stocks all the time. So once I saw this, imbalance starting in 2020, that's when I first bought LTHM. And then last year, I wanted to expand my exposure to the space, and that's when I added LAC last year. They've both done very well. The beauty of these is they're an exposure to speculative technologies in the way that they're related to electric vehicles and batteries, but the drawdowns in these stocks have been nowhere near comparable, whereas some of the electric vehicle and battery stocks I've traded and owned have gone down, 30, 40, 50, 60% from their highs. These stocks have fallen maybe 10 or 15% from their highs. So the stability in price is great. And I mean, that's not only from an investor's perspective, because I think whether you're an investor or a trader, stability in price for a growth stock is great because it's so rare. But that's the beauty of these things. They can not only be treated as commodities and cyclicals and metal stocks, but they can also be traded as growth stocks because they simply are. There's very few cases to make against that. And, pretty much any projections you look at are guaranteeing that this supply demand imbalance will continue to exist despite the expansions in CapEx of these companies. And so for me, these make excellent longs, not only in the short term, but in the long term. I mean, they're probably two, besides a few exceptions like Tesla and, other companies that I've held for years. These are companies that I plan to hold for years. I'll probably keep these both. I mean, I would imagine for a few years at least. So when I think long term, I mean, these really fit that narrative for me. I think all the way through, electric vehicles going from 3% adoption this year, or actually now it's closer to 4%, but 4% adoption this year. Electric vehicles are projected to be at 21 to 25% adoption by 2027. I don't know if we'll get there, but if we do, this supply demand imbalance is only going to continue to increase. And not to mention from the government side, which I've already talked about how, these companies are going to be, without a doubt subsidized in some manner by both the United States and Chinese governments, whether that's directly or indirectly via, facilitating their CapEx cycles. They're also going to be supported by major corporations who are getting involved in electric vehicles. I mean, we've seen Tesla sign 5 different exclusive lithium supply agreements in the last year, 5 different ones with 5 different companies. And you think about the nickel deal they just inked, and they had a nickel deal they inked with Vale last year as well. Expect Ford, GM, Volkswagen, BMW to all ink deals of these sorts. They may not be doing it now, right? Because when you go back to legacy internal combustion engine production, you didn't need to source metals and materials in the way that you do to produce electric vehicles and to produce batteries. It's a whole different manufacturing, production, and supply chain ballgame. That's why I always tell people, like, the assumption that people are making about legacy car makers just snapping their fingers and being electric vehicle producers, it's not that simple. They're going to need to secure exclusive metal supply contracts. The big 3 I always talk about are lithium, cobalt, and nickel. The same way that I talk about lithium, I expect there to be big demand increases for nickel and cobalt as well. I'm not sure we'll see the same perfect storm that we have here, where you have a supply demand imbalance, you have a massive abundance of the actual raw material, and you have government tailwinds as well. That to me is the perfect storm. I'm not sure that applies to nickel and cobalt also, but I expect those metals to grow either way. And so when you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, the turnover and the expansion of electric vehicles is inevitable, and these other corporations that are getting involved in electric vehicles will inevitably also have to pursue their own metal supply chain partners. I mean, you have the corporate partnership side aiding this narrative as well. So, these stocks, some weeks they rip, some weeks they don't. But I'm less concerned about the near-term price action. If I had thought that way about LTHM buying it at $8 in 2020, I wouldn't have held it. But I'm glad I did, because I had a pretty large position size, and it's paid very well to hold that stock. And same thing with LAC. I mean, I bought it, under 20 late last year, and now early this year, it's already trading at 30. So these stocks, I think there's a lot of demand. I think more and more institutions will start getting involved. The reason I prefer LTHM and LAC, granted they're mid caps, right? They're $3 or $4 billion companies. The reason I prefer them to, let's say, an ALB or one of the other major producers is for that exact reason that I brought up, with, the fact that we have this supply demand imbalance, we have an abundance of the raw material. These companies have a better ability to leverage that, to increase their capacity production capacity, and grow at a higher percentage in terms of growth than the bigger players who, they may expand a little bit, they may add 5-10% more capacity, but these are the kind of companies, these mid caps in this space are the kind of companies that can grow capacity by 60 or 70% in a 2-year cycle, and then really dramatically improve their value proposition and force the stocks to be re-rated as well. So, going into the end of this year and next year, I think Wall Street will put more eyes on these names. LAC itself has been picked up by Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse. I think it was Credit Suisse, but they've been picked up by a couple tier one analysts over the last few weeks. So it's kind of already happening. Wall Street's eyes are kind of already turning to these mid-cap lithium names. And I think over the course of the next 2 years, that will continue to happen. And I expect them all or mostly to have upside targets. These companies have very little in the way of headwinds. I don't even see a bear case for the sector at all. And, that's one of the things that I pride myself in doing, is anytime I go long on a sector exposure in this way, especially where I have 2 or 3 stocks paired as a sector exposure, I really try to, for my own benefit, explore a bear thesis on the sector. And I just simply can't see one for lithium. Every single piece of the formula is there. Like I said, I call it a perfect storm. So, if you're a person that has not looked into lithium stocks or does not have any exposure to lithium, I highly recommend researching the industry. I've done hundreds of hours of research on battery technology, lithium, cobalt, nickel, the applications, the alternatives. So if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to DM me if you're somebody who's interested in getting involved in lithium stocks, and I'll answer any questions you might have. But it's something that I think is really dramatically overlooked, not only by the retail investing community, but I think by Wall Street as well. And like I said, early this year, we've seen initiations on LAC. I think we'll continue to see coverage, upgrades, initiations on both of these stocks going forward. And, I think Wall Street will catch up to the narrative that I think at least is a very obvious one.
My man's passionate about lithium, in case y'all couldn't tell. I love it. All right, Evan, you got any questions there?
Yeah. So I will start this with you, Stock Talk, and maybe it can be a question that can kind of go around. It'll be 2 parts for you. So we had this conversation yesterday that, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, that a lot of research and a lot of stuff is just one Google search, one YouTube video, one good book, however you learn a way for finding it. So I kind of wanted to ask you, what are some terms that you think that you would search maybe like into Google or whatever specifically for lithium? And then maybe for more like, if you're a fundamental investor just starting out, maybe some of those more terms on videos you would look at. And then we talked yesterday about like, how do you get started? You can start searching up specific terms. And I know you had a couple opinions there, but yeah, we'll love to get your thoughts there.
You mean just terms related to like learning about lithium?
Yeah, lithium. Yeah, just, good search terms for you to kind of put in and get the right stuff out, at least get started.
Well, you want to look at the different types of lithium. You want to look at lithium carbonate, lithium hydroxide. You probably also want to study a little bit about battery technology so you understand the applications. You want to study about, what a lithium ion battery is. You want to look at what the difference between lithium ion batteries are and lithium metal solid state batteries. It's probably also worth exploring what I mentioned about CapEx cycles. That doesn't just apply to lithium, it applies to any sort of miner or metal mining stock in general. They all have CapEx cycles. STLD, which is a steel company, was an example of that last year. Literally the day their CapEx cycle ended, I went long the stock. The stock doubled in like 3 weeks. So shows you the power of these CapEx cycles. And if I didn't make that clear earlier, just to reiterate that for people who don't understand why it's significant, once one of these companies comes to the end of a CapEx cycle, that means they've finished increasing their production, right? So those expenses don't weigh on their balance sheet anymore. Like all that money they're dumping into production capacity increases doesn't weigh on their balance sheet anymore. But now they also have that increased production. So usually the stocks catapult in response to that because the balance sheet looks so much better, the ERs look so much better, and you have this additional capacity that gets scaled and scaled and scaled further and further. Like I said, it typically takes about 12 to 15 months to fully scale new capacity. So that's why those CapEx cycles are important. That's something to look at. I would also look at global lithium supply chains in China versus the United States. China and the U.S. are the two leaders for sure. China's definitely a bit ahead of us in terms of expansion and in terms of the way that the government is supporting these supply chains. But I think within the next 3 to 5 years, you'll see the United States government step in and really try to domesticate their own rare metal supply chains. It's one of the biggest, competitive advantages that China has over us, which is their control over these domestic rare metal supply chains. And so, I anticipate the United States will realize that. I think we already are realizing it. And I think our government will step in to invest in that area as well. But yeah, those are just some basic things I would look at into how to understand lithium and some key terminology.
Perfect. I do just want to step in quickly and I'll give it back to Gav. This is recorded, so if you were just furiously writing down there and you missed and you're sending us a DM or whatever, follow the Bullish Rippers account, the Green Raccoon. We're going to post the recording after. You're going to be able to see it. We're about, an hour and 24 minutes in, so you'll be able to find it right there. But yeah, just wanted to make sure I got that in there and throw it back to you, Gav.
I see we finally got the recording feature on this account. I don't think we had that last week, right?
No, I don't think so. I think that's why we didn't see the views, actually.
Yeah, we didn't even have that on Monday, so that's pretty cool. I also saw that we have the downvote feature now on people's comments. I don't know, they're switching it up, putting in some new features that don't make any money. Love to see it. Okay. With that being said, we have been running for an hour and a half. Also, if you haven't already checked it out, just a reminder, for the Bullish Rippers account, you're looking at the two co-hosts or the people that run it. So I'm Wolf, I do the spaces, host, moderate spaces. Evan does the tweets. You're kind of getting best of both worlds. We're almost at lucky number 13K on this account. We're literally like 21 followers from it. So if you haven't already followed the Bullish Rippers account, please do check it out. Evan, since we've been running about an hour and a half, I do have that next space that's going to be in 30 minutes. So don't want to push off.
We still got one or two. I definitely promised Gurg we'll get a little bit of a shorter version from him, and we'll give him like the couple minutes or whatever to talk in there. I'm going to say and guess it's Gap, but I won't blabber on for too long. I'll throw it right over to Gurg so we can get his thoughts. Definitely have you on in a future one to get some more in-depth thoughts, though, Gurg.
So for before I start, it is Gap, but I would like to continue with Stock Talk about lithium, rest of lithium. In the US, the biggest mine is in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the middle of the desert. But there are two main problems with that, right? One, you need a lot of water to pump out lithium. And there's almost no rainfall there. They have to import water from other states. And the second problem is that based on some, I think, an Indian territory, like the old people, right? Like they won't leave that, as they claim that's their home ground and they had a lot of wars and they own the land. So that's the main problem. But the second problem is the solid state ones, right? The solid state one, the batteries are very expensive right now, but will they be cheaper in the future? Yeah. But the main concern is the only way they go cheaper is with mass adaptation. But the only way we see mass adaptation is if they go cheaper. So they both depend on each other. I think in the next 3-4 years, you might see heavy machineries using these solid state batteries, but I don't think any of these big EV brands start to use solid states for the next 10, 15 years. So, but till then, lithium will be king. So, but the stock I will talk about is Gap. I've been talking about Gap for over a month now. The stock is up 20% so far. And today alone, the stock was up 6-7% because they announced an NFT collab. I'm not a big fan of this, but my stock's up, right? I can't complain. But Gap, right, they own brands like Gap Kids, Gap, and Old Navy, and 3 more brands. I think everyone knows here, right, what Gap and Old Navy does. Like these guys are legacy clothing retailers. But one thing everyone seems to be missing is the new collaborations with Kanye West and now Balenciaga. With the Kanye West collab, I think that can add another 2 to 2.5 billion a year for Gap. And they have pretty good margins too, right? So that should add another 250 million in free cash flow end of the year. They did take a hit in 2020, but so did all the retailers, right? Last year they did just under 14 billion in revenue, and right now Gap is still worth under 7 billion. They do have a bunch of debt, but they have been paying it off, right? Last year they had 2.2 billion in cash. Right now they have under a billion left in cash, and they have been selling their less profitable and highly expensive assets. Like in the Mexico region, they plan to sell all of their Old Navy to I think a private equity firm, and I think they might do the similar thing in the US and Canada soon, right? Spin off Old Navy or just sell it off to other interested parties. But so there's one more collab that's about to be announced soon. Is the Balenciaga one. And Balenciaga one, I haven't seen a big Wall Street firm report on that, and I haven't seen a single analyst make changes based on that, right? So that was leaked last week on Instagram by Kanye West. So Balenciaga is a high fashion brand. The prices are almost double what Gucci, Louis Vuitton, and other high-end fashion brands offer. And with this collab between Gap and Yeezy, people who want to buy Balenciaga but who can't afford that will love to be like they will be the first one lining up to buy this, and I think that can add another billion and billion and a half a year for Gap, but no one seems to be talking about that. So the main concern was Gap did reduce guidance due to supply chain issues, but that's happening with the entire industry. I think the supply chain issues for Gap they last I think 2 quarters, but I do believe they improve after that. So my end of the year price target is $30 for Gap, just over 100% from my entry.
Perfect. So looking for it to fill that initial gap, obviously having a fantastic day today, up 6% already on the day. Coming back from really once it fell to those lows of 15.98, it's back up now to 18.83. And if it was to hit 30, that would not be just reclaiming that initial, fall down, but really coming back towards its all-time highs. All-time high, or I guess
No, not all-time high. I think all-time high was
all-time high is 30 high?
2000, I think.
Okay, all right. Well, all-time high that matters.
I mean, the problem with that is, right, they did issue a lot more shares since then. So the chart is, like, when you look at the chart, right, from like a company that's like 20, 40 years old, that's been public, the chart's a bit misleading because they've issued so many more shares. And the market cap is almost double and triple what it was back then, even though the share price is less than what it was back then. So a bit misleading.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. Evan, you got any comments you want to make on that?
No, I think, I always have questions and stuff that we can add into it, but I know we do want to head into wrap-ups. I just want to kind of set it and just kind of get a comment out there at the start of this, and I'll throw it back to you. We've said this a couple times. This is definitely meant to be the start of a series, and it's really meant to be for long-term investors. I did say earlier that there's too many short-term and trading and technical analysis space, and that's not true. There's just not enough long-term investing ones, and we really want to try and bring that to you guys. So if you're in the crowd, you're hanging out, and you're a long-term investor, please let me know what you thought of the space, what the concept and everything like that. Maybe things that we could be doing better, things you would want to see for the future. But yeah, this is something we really want to try and get every single week. The way long-term investing really is, and the mentality and a lot of that, it kind of, you don't need to do it every single week. You kind of have a nice base at the start, and then you can kind of do it ongoing every other month or whatever. after that. But we want to find ways to bring it to you so that we can do it every single week, every other week, something like that. So we thought this concept of doing deep dives into companies to kind of give you how these long-term investors really think about stocks, what they're looking for, the type of terms they're saying, how they're, the type of advantages and where they're looking, and maybe some areas for you guys to start your research, a great area to start your research. So we hope there was some great value in that. Let us know what we can improve one more time, and make sure you're following all of our speakers up here. They really came up just for free. They gave such amazing information. I see From Growth to Value in the crowd. He's right at the top on your screen. He's got a bunch of followers. So you'll see him up there. Make sure you're following him as well. Big shout out to everyone. They're posting amazing information on their feeds. They came in here for free. All that we ask in return is that you give them a follow, check them out. And the truth of it is, if you really hate their content, which you won't, you can hit that unfollow button. But make sure you are following all of them. Check them out. Click into their profile, see everything else. And with that, I'll throw it back to you, Gav.
Gav, can you talk about AMC as your long thesis for long term?
Yeah, my long thesis on AMC is that the CEO loves selling millions of dollars of his own stock. And what's not to love
that
about
has
that?
to be bullish, right? The CEO is selling, like, he believes
that's what I
it
look
will
for.
hit $1 million. Like, that's when I bought at 70. Like,
And
if the
free
CEO
popcorn.
is selling all his shares, that's very, very bullish, Gav.
Yeah, it's, that is as bullish as
Let's
the kids are gonna get.
chill. We're starting this, like, honestly, I don't know
Okay.
if we can have like an invest space like focus for long-term investors again started and then joke around. He's kidding.
The one thing I also will say throwing out there, just on the stocks that were covered today, again, that was PGNY from Brad, Fiverr from Growth, and then Stock Talk actually I feel like covered a few, but all of them were lithium plays pretty much there. The one I will say is Brad on yours for Progeny. If you're looking at it just on the technicals, and I won't go into technicals for more than 20 seconds, but if you anchor a volume weighted average price from the March lows, which is, if you look at it just with a lot of these growth stocks, one of the most powerful indicators, it just bounced off of that like 2 days ago, and it's basically like looking to come off. So that could be a key level. So if you're loading up here, you're trying to find a good entry point, that could be something to keep an eye on. With that being said, Danny, I saw you came up. Did you want to throw out a minute or two of anything?
Sorry about that. Just had to unmute myself. No, I was just checking in, listening in. Didn't have anything necessarily prepared. What's going on, Brad? Yeah, just wanted to listen in and see what my friends up here were talking about.
Okay, sounds good. Awesome. Then I think we're going to go around and we're going to do just some closing commentary. I will ask people to keep these to about 2-ish minutes each, just because we do have to wrap up in about 10. I close out this one and get ready for the next. Kris, would love to hear from you first. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of long-term investment approaches as well, of course, and I'm a bit more growth-oriented because I'm forward-looking, and I always look at the long term, really long term, because a lot of people say they're long term investors, until the stock price drops, and then it becomes a lot more difficult. And I think one of the most important things that you should do if you want to invest for the long term is know your company very well. So make sure that you have a high conviction. So often when the stock price drops, I almost I'm ashamed to say it, but I'm often quite enthusiastic that I can add at a lower price. That is because I have that high conviction, because I know what the company does, because I know the industry trends, because I know the way the world evolves in this segment of the market. And that's very important to know. So, if you want to invest long term, make sure that you first put in the work before you, I see a lot of people just judging on 1 or 2 articles that they read, and they go along, and then the stock drops, 20, 25, 30%, and, they get out. And so, then they lose money, of course. So that's not the way to do it. You should be, especially in growth, you should be able to.
Okay. just going to take a second there, but make sure that you are following Kris. Of course, we're having some Android problems, but he puts out outstanding content, much written content, deep dives. I think he's got some services. If you click into his bio, he's a Seeking Alpha contributor, really doing a ton there. So we're going to keep it rolling, and if Kris gets back up here and he has anything else he wants to say, we'll throw that to him. But Brad, any closing comments?
Yeah, I'll just say that. So I spent a really long time saying a lot of nice things about Progeny, and I could do the exact same thing for any other position in my portfolio. And I think it's really important just to note that when you invest, especially when you invest in these really high growth, speculative, long duration assets, you will be wrong sometimes. I will be wrong sometimes. It's just inevitably going to happen. I posted a tweet about it earlier today that. I mean, kind of referring to a baseball analogy. So I'm sorry if you're not a fan of the sport, but I mean, if you go 1 for 3 or 1 for 4 with a home run and then you strike out in every other at bat, the way common equities are set up to provide uncapped potential upside and finite potential downside makes it so that's okay. So really, really want to just leave everyone with the idea that it's okay to mess up and it's going to happen. It's inevitable. And considering that, it's extremely important to kind of position size accordingly. And no matter how excited you are about any single company, to just define your risk. And Stock Talk Weekly talks about this all the time, to define your risk in a way that's palatable for you if it does turn into a zero. And if you are wrong, like we'll all be sometimes. So for me, I have a 4% of total funds cap on whatever I'll put into a position, no matter how excited I am about it. For you, it could be 2% or 1% or higher than 4%. But I think there really needs to be that finite cap set to define the maximum amount you're willing to lose on a position. So when we are wrong in the future, and it can't hurt us, it can't end us, it can't ruin us. It'll just be a learning experience for us to overcome, and one that's really not extremely painful to overcome if we've hit any of those homers, which hopefully we will. But I'll leave you with that message and excited to keep doing these in the future.
Perfect. Thank you. Kris, you got cut off there. Was there anything else you wanted to throw in?
Yeah, well, more or less the same thing that Brad said. So yeah, I'm good.
Perfect. Yeah, we're going to be doing this again. Next week we see some of our friends that are in the audience. Some of them came through. We'll definitely be reaching out to people like Investment Talk. I see Dylan in the crowd. You would be great for this, I'm sure, and several others. So we'll be bringing them up and making things like that happen. And Stock Talk, any closing thoughts?
No, man. I mean, I enjoyed it. I'll come with a more specific idea next week. I just wanted to speak on a sector I was bullish on today for the long term. But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I think it's a great idea. I think it's definitely a change of tune from most of the trading-based spaces we do. I'm both a trader and an investor, so I enjoy talking about both the long-term view and the short-term view on things. So yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks for hosting these as usual. Follow all the speakers up here, of course. Follow from Value, Brad, Stock Market Nerd is his handle. Danny, I know he didn't get a chance to speak, but he's a great trader. The Pup of Wall Street's up here. Follow Evan, Stock Market News, Wolf Financial, Bullish Rippers. Follow them all. They're all great. Follow me. You should be following all of them. So appreciate you guys, and it was good talk.
Thank you, Stock Talk. Yeah, definitely agree. We're glad to get this kind of series worked in. For anybody that's been following the Wolf account for a long time, I actually really came up with the roots completely, wrapped around fundamental analysis. Those were all the first people that I met. Those are all the people that I was doing spaces with every Friday. We were doing a ton of those and then really dove in, I feel like, to the trading side. And now I'm, really comfortable there, comfortable talking on those spaces, doing my own charting. And now I kind of want to just get into that regular mix. And maybe there's even other spaces that we add in. But again, this will be done by Bullish Rippers every Thursday at 12 p.m. EST so that people can, pick and choose. And then one more time, so some people have been DMing me about this. If you want to know when all of our spaces are, we have a free public Google Calendar. Anybody can get added to it. All you have to do is DM the Wolf account or Stock Market News. Shoot them over. DMs are wide open. Click into their accounts right now. Shoot them over your Gmail. You could just do this to one of them. The Wolf account's fine. I'll see that and I'll take care of it. and just add that Gmail to it and just ask me on the calendar. That's it. Some people have been asking to be added, but they didn't send over an email. That's the only way we can add you. So please do help expedite that process. And then of course be following, the Wolf account, Stock Market News, Stock Talk Weekly. We're like on all the spaces pretty much together. So as long as you're following those accounts, you're going to see these spaces pop up at the top of your timeline. Just makes life easier. I think that's pretty much everything for me. I'll close out in just a minute, but I want to throw over to you, Evan, first to give your closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you. I'll echo again. All these people come up here for free and give amazing information. These are all fantastic long-term investors up here. Danny's definitely more of a trader, but still, an amazing follow. Check all of them out. Give them a follow. Shout out to Wolf and the Gov Blacksburg account for hosting the space and helping me do that. There's a lot more topics that we're going to talk about in the future. The spaces, I was kind of trying to use it as the start of a long-term investor, and there's a lot of really great questions and topics we can go to. Brad hinted at a little bit there with position size. I think that's going to be definitely a huge focus on one of the next spaces or so. How you size your positions, portfolio management, everything like that will be one of the questions that we get to. But yeah, there's a lot going forward. This is definitely a series that we're going to be continue doing. I did also want to give one small shout out to an app that I've actually been working on and helping out a little bit. It is definitely small work. I'm not out there developing anything or whatever, but I am definitely putting a lot of input in, and it is my pin tweet right now, but pretty much there's nowhere that you can track all your stocks, crypto, and NFTs across everything. I have multiple accounts, and it's hard to see. I'm flipping through 20 different stuff to see where I'm at. This app kind of solves that. You can link everything to it, and you can see it all nice in one place. A lot of cool stuff is improving there. Yeah. So that's my pinned tweet. You should check it out. It's not just an ad or whatever. It's definitely something that I am a part of, and working with the team directly and doing some great stuff. It's actually Roundhill invested in it, and that's really the people who started it. So cool. Or one of the guys at Roundhill who is now left to do this full time started it. But yeah, cool thing there. Check it out. And big shout out to you, to Bullish Rippers for hosting this.
Yeah, so that company's Asset Dash, right?
Yeah, it's called Asset Dash. I definitely should have got that in there.
Tell them to DM me. We'll make it happen.
Dude, I did. Did they not?
No, not yet. We'll make it happen.
Okay, perfect. I'll message them. I think
that
they
Yeah, so Evan DM'd me the other day, and he was like, "Hey man, like, do you know of any apps where you could see like all your stocks, crypto, and NFTs in one place?" I was like, "Nah, dude, it doesn't exist." And he goes, "That's where you're wrong." And so, that was pretty cool to see what was going on there. Thank you everybody that tuned in today. This was the first in our series, and we'll be back with this next week, but also a bunch more spaces today. See ya. Take care, everybody.